On a stormy February day in 2025, I stopped at the Shiloh Primitive Baptist Cemetery near Frisco City, Alabama, to visit the grave of my great-great-grandfather, Alan Jefferson Driskell. He was a Primitive Baptist preacher who's buried there, and the Driskell family has a long and interesting history in North America. The Driskell family line originated in Cork County, Ireland. The family made its way to Maryland, as in they were devout Catholics, and Maryland was a Catholic colony in the 1600s when they arrived. By the early 1800s, the Driskell line of my lineage had made its way to Covington County, Alabama, and Catholicism had given way to Primitive Baptist theology. Alan Jefferson Driskell was born in 1849, likely in Georgia, and was involved in the founding of the Pilgrim's Rest Primitive Baptist Church, which organized on April 30th, 1859, in a little community called Beaver Falls that existed between Covington counties Andalusia and Opp. The church is no longer there. It's marked by a cemetery. In 1856, Alan Jefferson Driskell married Mary Taylor. And in November of 1860, he became ordained as a deacon in the Pilgrim's Rest Primitive Baptist Church at Beaver Falls, along with Joseph G. Currington. Both of these men were ordained at an ordination service in the latter part of that year, and it involved their being questioned as to their adherence to the faith and practice of the Primitive Baptist churches and their calling to office. They were set apart to the office by the laying on of hands and were given a Holy Bible as a man of their council. This pattern of ordination for the deaconate was followed throughout the history of the church. Thereafter, Alan Jefferson Driskell joined the 18th Alabama in August of 1861 and was in Company B. They organized at Auburn, and they marched off to fight at the Battle of Shiloh, and later these men were ordered to Mobile in 1863 and fought at Chickamauga and at Nashville in December of 1864. Prior to the battle in December 1864, Alan Jefferson Driskell probably was on furlough when he came home to deal with a situation where his church was seeking to exclude him in March of 1864 for joining the Masonic Order. It was considered to be reproachful conduct. He left the church and returned to his regiment. And after the disastrous affair at Nashville, the men returned to South Alabama in January 1865 and participated in the defense of Spanish Fort in March of that year. The men of the 18th escaped through the swampy grasslands of Spanish Fort and moved on to help defend Blakely, and thereafter withdrew from Blakely and surrendered at Meridian, Mississippi in May 1865. The decimated regiment limped into Meridian, proud but thin as to their numbers. The regiment had totaled 858 men in January of 1861, yet disease, combat, and injuries reduced their ranks to 275 in November of 1864 before the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee, and even less by war's end. Thereafter, they sought to be as good as citizens as they had been soldiers when they returned to their civilian lives. After the war, Driskell eventually made his way to Jackson, Alabama, in Clark County, where he owned a farm and a butcher shop on College Avenue, and this is now in downtown Jackson, Alabama. His sons and daughters were raised in the area, and his grandson and my grandfather, Alan Leonard Driskell, was born in Jackson in 1890. Driskell left Jackson for relatively unknown reasons in the late 1890s and moved to Jones Mill, Alabama, now Frisco City, and was involved in the Shiloh Primitive Baptist Church. He left for a short time and went to a community called Bromley near Stapleton in Baldwin County. There's evidence of a patent deed that he received during the Theodore Roosevelt administration. While there, he helped found a Primitive Baptist church in the area in 1904, and while at Roan Fork, He drove a herd of livestock from the Frisco City area to Baldwin County, but a measles outbreak eventually possibly led to his return to Frisco City because he was elderly at the time. More can be read on this subject in the book Backtracking the Wood Tick Trail by Vivian McCrary Taylor, and that she wrote a splendid book on this subject in the 1890s, and it dealt with other people that we've covered, such as Willard Sibley. When Driskell returned to Frisco City, he was a little bit older, and he was not in as good a health, and he passed away on December 28, 1914, old and full of years, and is buried in the Shiloh Primitive Baptist Cemetery near this old sanctuary. He had drawn a Confederate pension in his later years because of his military service in the Confederate Army. After his passing, his wife Mary drew the pension for the remainder of her life. She passed away more than a decade after her husband and was living at Exell, Alabama, until her passing on June 10, 1925, at the age of 87. Today, descendants of Alan J. Driskell and Mary Taylor Driskell live throughout the southwest Alabama area. They're farmers, citizens. Some are still of their strong faith and are good people, and there's many of their descendants in the area. The headstone of Alan Jefferson Driskell, upon a deep cleaning on that rainy day, revealed the message on the tombstone says, God gave, he took, he will restore. He doeth all things well. It reminds me of a quote from the William Faulkner story, Requiem for a Nun. The past is never dead. It's not even the past. All of us labor in webs spun long before we were born, webs of heredity and environment, of desire and consequence, of history and eternity. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your week.